Halloween episode, but actually more so halfway point episode. Doing anything fun for Halloween?
Oh yeah, we have a trick or treating neighborhood. We go to the in-laws neighborhood, and it's one of
Nice.
those nice setups where you have like cul-de-sacs every 3 inches. So you have a drove of like parents that hang out at the edge of the cul-de-sac, and the kids kind of run down. So it's a decent setup. It's gonna be cold though.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had our first sub 20-degree day today here in Minnesota.
Oh
So
wow.
that's yeah. It hit quick. I busted out the winter jacket. Started my car early before I left today. Made sure she was all warmed up, and yeah, we're ready. We're ready for it as much as we'll ever be. A little earlier than usual this year, though. We've we've usually gotten some reprieve until I don't know Thanksgiving ish, but
Yeah.
we were literally in 80-degree days the first week of October. It was really obscure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just been so wet here. Like we had a couple finally
Oh sure.
first like week or so without any rain. Now we're wondering if we're gonna get some snow on Halloween or something like that. Pretty sure any low areas. I know we have low areas on our property that are just have been swishy for like a few months. It might just become swampland. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I live right by the, like, not too far from the Mississippi River, and the river was so low this year. It was different for sure. We did not get as much rain. It was pretty dry, and now I'm looking outside. My grass is green, but it's 20 degrees. I'm like, this is so off, but it's it's okay. It's time for it. I have a feeling it might be at least the Farmer's Almanac says it's going to be a rough winter. I don't know if I don't know if I believe that thing all that much. I feel like seasons are just changing. Like
Yeah.
it's not so much like it's like summer goes from June to September now. Winter or fall goes from end of September to mid November now, and then winter goes from like true winter with snow and cold goes in from like end of December, January ish until like beginning of April. At least that's Minnesota. Like I don't know what spring is. Spring doesn't exist in my opinion. So, but enough about
Yeah.
with the weather and the seasons. But that's just what we put up with here in the Midwest and the Northeast. So,
Yeah.
all right, and no, not
Um,
St. Brown. Are you watching the game right now?
yep. Yeah. And I was gonna say too, like I used to be able to reliably take December winter with my first round weather pick with be able to count on a few inches of snow, but those days are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right up. It looks like we are synced up on the game because that was exactly when St. Brown caught that on my end.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, that's always the trick. But I think if we're both streaming, then that benefits. Yeah, as I said, like I need Gibbs tonight, but I'm going against the Lions defense and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So weird. Let's just. Oh, geez, he got dropped. Weird weekend for fantasy.
They're
Just
gonna say weird helmets for the Lions.
Well, very weird helmets for the Lions,
Yeah,
and very interesting that the Tennessee Titans get the Houston Oiler jerseys. I
yeah,
don't understand how that was dictated. I don't understand why Houston didn't put their foot in the sand when they got a franchise and just took the Oiler name. Kind of like what happened in the NBA where
yeah,
Charlotte was the Bobcats for a bit, and then they were like, "No, we're going to the Hornets, and New Orleans can figure out whatever they want to be." I'm
yeah.
surprised that the Houston franchise, with all the history, wasn't able to come to an agreement with the NFL, or if there was some royalties thing that the Titans owned the brand. Or
I think that
technically, doesn't the NFL own all the brands?
I think it comes down to. Well, I believe the team actually owns the naming rights. So, for example, the when they switched from the Tennessee Oilers to Hoover, which they were for like a year or two there, to the Titans, they had to check with the Jets because the Jets were actually the Titans for a couple years when they started their franchise. So I believe the team were preserved naming rights, and yeah, a good example there would just be I don't think the I don't think they would have become the Baltimore Browns, but um, the Cleveland Browns basically kept the name in Cleveland. The Colts didn't stay in Baltimore. It seems like I don't know. It's I'm not sure why some teams seem to prioritize preserving the name and rights or trying to acquire them back when they take over for a team in a city. Honestly, I think the Oilers. I mean, not that they necessarily like won a Super Bowl, so maybe there wasn't that much behind that
There's
name,
a
so
lot
maybe
more
it wasn't worth
history
it.
though than the
Yeah,
Texans.
I think the one phrase I had heard at the time was not all of us are Oilers, but all of us are Texans. But Texans, in my opinion, is one of the weaker names in the NFL. To be honest.
It's awful. Like
Yeah,
I'm saying that very politely. Like it's I don't I think it's one of the dumbest names.
I
And
think the other names in the running were the Stallions and the Wildcatters. I think. Uh,
I think it should be. I would prefer they did the Oilers. I
yeah,
think that it's has the tradition like Miami and the Dolphins, Green Bay and the Packers. It has that history to it. And I'm not like sitting. I'm not trying to sit on some soapbox here and call out the league, but it's kind of stupid when you decide to, take the Oilers away from Houston when you have a franchise in Houston, and then you pull a cease and assist on the University of Houston for having a similar color scheme. That I think is hysterical, and somebody is trying way too hard to do their job at the front office, and they should really just stop ruining the fun for everybody. Like it's a cool color scheme. There's not a lot of teams that rock it. So now the NFL is just like, nope. Like what if the University of Houston basketball team did that? Like wore those colors? Would the NFL care? Like I don't think they would.
yeah. It wouldn't make it, even if it's the same city. It wouldn't really make that much of a difference. It's I like that
No.
phrase though, trying too hard to do their job. It's funny because it's actually the Oilers. I think the color scheme it's been in now for probably last at least 5 to 8 years when the lighter color schemes have been in because in the 2000s when so right after actually late 90s into the 2000s it was all the darker colors like the that's when the Jets and Eagles switched to those darker greens. That was very in at the time.
Eagles
But
moved
yeah.
from the Kelly green, right?
Eagles went from Kelly Green to I don't know what they call the green now. The Jets went from I think officially left there. It wasn't Spearmint Green anymore. It was more Kelly Green, but to the Hunter Green that they were now. It's
Sure,
Gotham.
sure, sure.
But the 49ers went to a darker red, I think it was for a bit, and then
Oh, and
switched
the
back.
Chargers went to that darker blue too. That's right.
Yeah, which I think the ownership for Chargers, like it was the Spanos, really liked those uniforms too because the fans are clamoring for them to go back for a long time, and then
Sure.
before they actually did. Yeah,
I mean, that it's probably one of the dumbest things, but I feel like the teams that have figured out a way to like keep their colors on brand, I feel like those are just the ones that are it's timeless, Steelers, Packers, Bears, Dolphins. I just feel like those are some 49ers. Those color schemes, those color waves aren't going anywhere with those franchises. And I don't know. There's something steady about it. I guess the Giants even went to that darker blue for a while too. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's so
actually, yeah,
weird. That's
yeah.
really weird to think about. Yeah, overall though, weird weekend. A lot of the top performers not doing so hot. Very confusing with what happened to Kansas City and San Francisco. I mean, Kansas City, I'll take. For Kansas City, I understand it's a division game. It's in Denver. Still no excuse though because you have to play them every year. In my opinion, if I'm the Chiefs, regardless of that though, I'm willing to give the Chiefs one because you look at Kelce, he still produced, and out of all the fantasy assets on that team, that's the one you expect to maintain some consistency on. But the 49ers, that's a weird one. Like it's like was it when they lost Debo, things really started going downhill for them, or because I remember watching that game when things really started going downhill in Cleveland, and I've somehow caught a little bit of every Niners game the past since this precipitous just decline has occurred, and I'm like, whoa, this is obscure.
Yeah, I mean, I picked the Bengals this week to win straight up, partially because I was not doing well in my pool and I needed to shake it up, but partially because I just was expecting the Bengals to kind of turn it around after they had a bye week in there. They're a talented team. I kind of felt it coming, but not because of anything I could point to on the stat
No,
sheet. It just felt like there was like the good team has to show up eventually, if they're ever going to, which they're running out of time to do that. And he's got the same costume as my 1-year-old.
oh my gosh. I love the visual of Aikman standing right next to him.
Standing
Like
next to
it's just
a
like
dinosaur.
look
Yeah,
at look at look at you, son.
yeah,
His buddies him just like, ugh. Oh man, that's funny. It's more funny watching it without the sound sometimes than with the sound. That's for sure. So,
yeah.
ugh, yeah. I have it on my other monitor. So, but yeah, weird week. But it seemed like the fantasy assets you needed to perform performed accordingly. And since we're here at the halfway point, as we discussed, these are recap episodes. We're putting them on Byron's YouTube channel. We're not really. I'm not really doing any predictions because I'm just want to react to what's been going on, and I think we've definitely seen um, some cream rising to the top going into the second half. As we're rounding out Q2 here, I know that we have a game tonight, but I don't anticipate any of the players in this game tonight to really shake up what's been going on. They're just from a consistency week in and week out. They just haven't been there. So let's get started with the top two quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Um, Honestly, I feel like this would be everybody's dream Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think if you want the Clash of the Titans Super Bowl, if that's your thing, then I would definitely agree with that. Um, I mean, you could say Mahomes may have been in that spot up into in the top two up until this past weekend, but with that game will if you got 5 points out of Patrick Mahomes in a given week when if you're you have Mahomes, you're expecting him to get something like 20 points or more. 15 points off the average is going to put you at below 40% win chance. In fact, probably down more around like 20 to 30% chance of winning just by himself. So those kind of weeks are very tough to overcome. I think if we're not seeing the type of quarterback we saw last year where we had multiple players that were playing like overall QB1s through
Just
the first
crazy
half of the
numbers
year.
at the quarterback spot.
Yeah, it's been more it's been more muted in terms of quarterback performance. Justin Herbert has actually been one of on my board. He's been the fourth best quarterback with a very not that everyone's saying that Justin Herbert's like arrived either. So it's a very understated campaign for a number 4 overall type QB. And Lamar is turning on a bit. So I think those are the guys you're talking about. But yeah, Josh Allen is as the top guy, and I haven't done a obviously without this game finishing. I don't typically completely run the numbers for the week to avoid double work here,
I
but
wouldn't
yeah,
expect you to.
my judgment here is that it's Allen and Mahomes, it's Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Herbert, and Jackson, and Allen with a little bit of space over Jalen Hurts.
We had Herbert up there last. Herbert was top. Go from like when we were looking at Q1, and then Josh Allen was in second team. Now here's where things started to get interesting. Was in the running back position. We had Etienne rise up for from where I'm sitting. Um, and I don't know if you want to just we can talk from a fantasy games one standpoint. Travis Etienne coming up, and then of course Christian McCaffrey still top tier, no question about it. Um, Raheem Mostert was the one that dropped down for me, and then Zach Moss was rounded out the going into this part of the season. He rounded out that 4 spot, and I think it's because Kyron Williams got hurt,
Yeah, yeah,
and Devin or Devon Achan.
yeah. Achan and Kyrie Williams were. I love Achan as by going into this week. Achan was RB6 and Kyrie Williams is RB7. The one name you didn't mention there that's competitive here is probably Alvin Kamara, where
Okay.
he's started to do something here for the first time in a while. Been waiting for this for over a year here, but yeah, it's basically it seems like it's for the beginning part of the season. It was McCaffrey, then everyone else. Mostert then had a few consistent or a few big games in there, but now ETN with a couple of great games back to back, and I think he's gonna maybe not necessarily close the gap that much to McCaffrey, but ETN is finally starting to fulfill, in my opinion, fulfill his potential here. He's one of the few backs that have like three down talent. And the question is whether or not he actually gets used that way.
I attribute it to a number of backs from last year, or running backs who we'd expect to do a little bit better, getting slower starts. Um, I think Mostert had a few weeks. He cooled off a little bit depending on the matchup and playing second fiddle to Achan. And then Josh Jacobs slow out of the gate. I mean, now he's finally rounding out, but I feel like if Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor would have started the year and everything would have been as usual, or if Saquon Barkley would have played a little more, I think we would see some of those names more closely. I thought it was going to be potentially between Etienne and Kenneth Walker for
Yeah,
who was going to be that next up and comer, because this is truly, even though it's Etienne's like third year in the league, it's actually more like his second. If we're really gonna, like, how good was that one year that he didn't play football at all? The amount of experience you gain just from the mental reps and having an NFL training, like that's huge. And we talk about the running back position getting like younger, but what about like NFL teams kind of um taking a page out of the NBA's book when it comes to the running back position? Because I'm looking at guys like Kendre Miller right now, who's probably not going to get that much playing time this year, but his youth is actually a net benefit for him, considering one, he gets to get a couple of reps. Two, he gets to learn behind one of the better running backs of the past 5 years. And three, he's just in an NFL room where he has to be a grown up at 21, which doesn't happen for most 21-year-olds in college. I attribute
yeah,
a similar thing with Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin next year. He's only going to be 20 going into the NFL. There's only upside going there, especially if he can sit behind somebody. Look at Charbonnet and what's his face, Tank Bigsby. They're not getting a whole lot of workload, but they are learning a lot behind the guys they're behind, and that could be a detriment to Etienne and Walker going into year 2, 3, or 4 for them. But that's
yeah,
invaluable experience those guys are getting.
yeah. And it's interesting because with where the running back position is right now, where you have it's effectively your career is it's almost just like your career is your rookie contract, and however much you can, you don't have much leverage then to get paid for it in getting a deal where everyone and their mother knows you're going to eventually fall off, and if you don't, it'll be the exception. So I can see that ETN, by taking a year off, not year off, by being injured, ends up learning and maybe gets a better run at it when he gets a chance to play. Whereas because it's such a revolving door amongst the young guys, if he had played and wasn't quite the same player, maybe he maybe the Jaguars are investing in a running back either through the draft or in free agency, and he's not getting the same amount of playing time afterwards, and he doesn't get the same amount of game experience that he gets once he's had a little bit more time to digest, that first year out of college. So I think it'd be an interesting thing um, to to try and do an analysis on at some point too, to say like does what does experience at versus age, and also does potentially having a missed year within your rookie contract, how much does that help you, or is it a detriment in some of the ways you might expect? I'm not sure, but it's an
I
interesting
think
thing to think about.
two guys. Best example of this is Austin Eckler and Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, well,
They
Mostert
they were
too. Yeah,
they were
he's
both. You think about their situations.
yeah.
They were much
Eckler,
older when they finally got a whole backfield, basically, to
yeah. I would say,
use with.
honestly, Mostert seems like a very special circumstance, because he was not only like 27 for his breakout year, very old for running back, but he wasn't like someone that was in waiting for a while. Like, I was trying to think of a player with a similar late breakout age. Justin Forsett was the closest I could come up with,
Oh
where he
wow!
had that was breakout, where he was a little bit older and ended up being the longest thing running back from his draft class. But he wasn't necessarily like a borderline roster guy or a special teamer. He was just he was a known quantity, I think, as a someone who could break out. So the Mostert situation is pretty special. Special Eckler, I guess, is kind of just like Melvin Gordon's. He was the Melvin Gordon as like Michael Turner was the Danny Tomlinson. He was just he was the clear number two, and eventually he was just going to take over. Although, granted, with obviously Michael Turner didn't take over for Tomlinson. He went and got his own job with the Falcons there. But it's we've talked about before the difference between age and wear and tear, and what is really the difference here. And I think that's where the reason why they're doing well at this point in their careers too is that's because they just weren't used up in the first couple of years. They're effectively their rookie contracts right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject when you really try to boil down the game of football to a science, because there's so many ebbs and flows and situational analysis to factor in, and you just look at how much the game has changed over the past 5 years, especially, and what that impact of fantasy looks like. I mean, we went from talking about like, oh wow, like the running back that's going to get the most volume in the passing game is going to be the running back who we're going to see the most from, and now we're just like, is there a running back that's going to get enough snap percentage to even be starting
Yeah,
relevant? Sometimes it's like
yeah,
that it literally like our thought process in like 2.5 years has shifted to being like, how do I get a running back that's actually going to be on the field and actually see a workload, because it just feels like an anomaly right now, and it's so
yeah.
week to week.
Yeah, like when I first started playing fantasy, it always seemed a little bit strange to me that you would have two starting running backs, just because in real life at the time, like my first year I played fantasy was 2002, and your starting running backs were the running back and the fullback. So you really just had one fantasy running back, and it seemed like no, I even where you're gonna have two or three wide receivers is very different. A lot of teams would run with your fourth wide receiver would get more work than your second running back in an NFL team. But now that's not the case. Now it's like the running backs are trending more and more to be like a receiver, where good volume for a running back used to be 80% of the work for the position. Now, if you get 50% of the work, that's a ton. Like you used to have, outside of like the Derrick Henry years in 2020 to 2021, etc., you wouldn't have players with the over 20 carries per game. I mean, you had Larry Johnson way back in the day, who was going to set like single season carries records. I actually think he maybe did but he came in. But this now, if a player gets 10 to 15 carries in a game, that's a big workload.
All right, let's
By
take
the
a
way, it
look
looks
at it.
like
Stat meals. Which NFL RB has had the most carries in a game 2023?
by the way, it looks like
Oh,
Jameson Williams is trying out his cold weather gear, even though they're playing indoors. He's
no,
getting ready.
that's his COVID face buff.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
gotta be safe.
Okay, let's see here. No, I want 2023. They gave me 45. Okay, okay. So Saquon Barkley just broke the most attempts yesterday.
Yeah, that makes
36.
sense.
36.
Well, given that the Giants never threw the ball, they that's not surprising. That was I don't know how much you want to talk about again. To look like that, it was amazing for me as a Jets fan that they pulled it off. But that was ugly. Tommy DeVito, who he's a funny guy, right? Funny how
Yes.
funny like a
Yep.
clown. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then second was David Montgomery, that fateful night when the Packers season took a nosedive and he just came back from injury. And then you had Zach Moss against Baltimore that one week that was the 24th of December. And then those are the only 30 carry. That's the 30 carry club this season. It's Saquon, David
no,
Montgomery, and Zach Moss. And you look at those guys have been in and out of injury protocols this
yeah,
year. When you think about it, I mean Zach Moss less so, but David Montgomery and Saquon Barkley have been neck and
yeah,
neck. So
yeah.
yeah, it's
And
it's kind of interesting.
I remember, I think it was a playoff game in the 2000s. The most carries I've ever remember costing in a game was, I think, Lamar Smith for the Dolphins. He had something like 40 carries plus, or something absurd like that. Said he like couldn't even like walk the next day, which is understandable. That just stuck out to me. I wonder that if you talk about records that will never be broken, I don't know if that's the record, but yeah, most carries in game will not be broken. That's going to look like a Cy Young type wins type of record pretty soon.
45 in 1988.
No, this was the one I had in mind. Wouldn't it be that if the record was someone else staying 45 and 88, that might be it. Lamar Smith was probably around like 2001 or so with the
No,
Dolphins.
that's all time.
Yeah,
StatMuse gave me that.
who was that?
Here, I'll tell you. I just had it. Jamie Morris in
No, okay,
45 rush attempts against the Bengals, December 17th, 1988. And then you go down, you got Rudy Johnson in 2003. Holy smokes, we really go back here. James Wilder, 1984. Butch Woolfolk, 1983. Ricky Williams, 2003. So
yeah,
2003, great running back year. If that'd be a fun one to look at sometime, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. I think it's so honestly, it's like an eclipse when a guy gets over 37 carries, but well, yeah, it's running backs are the position's changing. You got more and more stuff going on in the backfield. I mean, Seattle will put three guys in the backfield now. I've seen that formation quite a bit. It's gonna get more and more interesting. I feel like, and yeah, just after what the 49ers did with Debo Samuel that one year, I all bets are off. I'm waiting for Laviska Shenault to move to running back,
yeah,
please. Like, if he wants to do a career-saving move, he would have moved to running back this season. But like I've said, I don't think Frank Reich's creative enough to consider that or even have him do that. But whatever. Hopefully
yeah,
he realizes that, and here's my message someday. But I can dream. All right, let's wide receiver time. Top two: Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown, and then I have on the second tier Stefan Diggs and Puka Nakua. And I think Puka Nakua will drop more as the season progresses. I don't anticipate, unless something happens where Cooper Cup goes down again and we get some more like just shocking Puka Nakua games. I am shorting my Puka Nakua stock because I do see place for him in this league. I just don't. I think that his arrival was sooner than expected due to the situation in Los Angeles.
Yeah, he's a little lower on the fantasy games one standings. He's down to wide receiver. Well, he's going into this week. He was wide receiver 7 because of his percent started numbers being a little bit lower.
Really, they were lower.
During the week. Yeah, well, he basically wasn't started in week 1, which is one of
Okay.
his biggest weeks. So, but so we have Tyreek, Tyreek, followed by what I'm pretty sure will be AJ Brown once I update the numbers this week, and Stephon Diggs. Keenan Allen, I think, did enough to stay ahead of Justin Jefferson, as it not going negative here. And we'll see what Amon-Ra does tonight because he's also in the conversation, but not anywhere near the top. He's more so in that second team territory. Tyreek
Yeah,
with a Tyreek potentially with the fantasy MVP season this year, arguably the NFL MVP, I guess.
I would say so. I mean, could a wide receiver win that though? Like that would be interesting. And then again, like haven't hmm
Yeah, they get paid like they're supposed to be able to win it.
they should honestly sometimes like the influence that he has on a game, he changes the way defenses have to do things, and it's quite
Yeah,
shocking.
yeah.
Um,
Plus the speed combination the Dolphins have between Hill and Waddle, then obviously H
Stupid.
and Mostert. Yeah, it's I think it's fully intentional. If you can just dominate this one area of the game, the technical advantages that provides you are huge. Like it reminded me of when um, the Jets were attempted but failed to get Nnamdi Asomugha assigned to go the opposite of Revis, where if you had two shutdown corners, that would be such a similar type of tactical advantage, but they couldn't pull it off. Although it turned out that Asomugha was maybe a bit of a system cornerback for the Raiders. But yeah, it there's where it how much of it is Tyreek being valuable because of his speed, and how much of it do you just give credit to Mike McDaniel's offense for knowing how to use it? Because Tyreek
It's
was,
definitely
yeah,
a combination of both. I mean, Tyreek's a very smart football player in the same, in the same vein to be able to and onto I think Mike McDaniel's offense has a huge part of it too, but Tyreek knows how to find space, being a smaller guy out there. Yeah, he's faster than everybody, but you still have to get in the sight line of your quarterback. So that and Tua's not the tallest guy either, so it's
yeah.
you think about all the different factors that go into that. There's definitely some design to it, I'm sure. Like Mike McDaniel seems to have a purpose for everything, but at the same time, sometimes good football players are just good football players. Like, look at how good Travis Kelce is with Patrick Mahomes in terms of finding space in the field, or you look at Devonte Adams with Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't like they were necessarily doing anything out there. Devonte Adams was just a better route runner and knew how to find the space where the defenders wouldn't go. Speaking of which, too, um, I wonder if the regression in certain quarterbacks' play has to do with so Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts have additional elements to their game with their running capabilities and the way they're able to get the extra yards because their offenses are built around them to do that. Plus, they possess the capability to do that. But there has been a lot less PI calls down the field this year than there has been. For some reason, they're not putting much precedent on that. And I kind of appreciate it though, because I always felt like games kind of got ruined by those PI calls, and there seem to be calling more of those calls in the front between the line as opposed to down the field. Uh, I wonder if that changes some things for certain quarterbacks. Not saying they depended on it, but it definitely prevented secondaries from being as handsy with the receivers as they seem to be able to play a little more freely this year.
Yeah, I think I've seen, yeah, maybe more defensive holding calls than pass interference
Yeah,
calls or something.
yep. That I
Yeah,
think that's what they're doing to make up for it
yeah,
because
like
they
they're
don't
yeah,
want to. give up so much like big yard plays.
Yeah, because you can't. It's the pass interference is like such a tough thing to do because like right, you don't want to just make it a 15-yard penalty because then you're incentivizing interference on the deep ball. But
Yeah.
at the same time, in theory, you could you could argue that some teams have done this where basically their entire offense is to once a drive, just throw a bomb and try to draw a defensive pass interference call on it, like underthrow a deep one. Um, and the Jets actually in overtime against the Giants got in the field goal range on one of those. And I wonder how much of that was, Rodgers had a headset. Maybe like he's like, this is something we've done before. Like let's draw the DPI here, because not a lot else was working for the Jets on offense there. But I don't like it when you get interference calls. If the refs if the league is trying to go in the direction of less of those calls, I think that could improve. It could lead to general improvement of the quality of football here. But there's, I don't know, maybe more to be seen with that.
The
Maybe
Packers wide
yeah,
the Packers
yeah,
wide receivers were trying to intentionally draw it yesterday.
yeah.
It was
Oh yeah,
it looked really bad. Like Christian
yeah.
Watson was like asking for it. And I'm like, dude, Rodgers isn't your quarterback anymore. You're not
Right.
going to get that. Like it was fun while it lasted, but you're going to have to actually get open. So
Yeah,
that was something that I noticed, and I'm like, okay, yeah. So he was definitely a beneficiary of it when Rodgers was his quarterback. League pulls back from calling it, and then what would have been called last season, because the Vikings corners are terrible. Like there were some where it was kind of a 50-50 where the ref definitely could have thrown it, but I'm glad he kind of didn't, because I'm like, no, you need to get better as a receiver. Like you can't just try to draw calls. Like you're not James Harden out there. Like just
yeah,
it's it was fun while it lasted when you had Rodgers as your quarterback. Now grow up and actually be a receiver. So I don't know. That's just kind of my little Packers rant there. But that's where I saw it in particular yesterday when the Packers wide receivers were getting kind of pushed around a little bit, and you could see it. They're like, I definitely got that call last year against this
yeah.
team. What happened? And it's kind of funny because it's like, nope, not happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're as a player, it probably has to go like to levels. Like you have, all right, first you have to be good enough that you start getting benefit of the doubt
Yeah. Yep.
calls, and then you're like, all right, I'm getting this enough. Now I know how to make sure the refs are going to call it. Like it's probably a similar trajectory. If you're like if you rely a lot on driving a basketball, it's like you have to earn it first. You can't just make an art out of it when you haven't established yourself as like, yeah, no
Well,
ref
yeah,
can
like
forget who you are. Yeah.
Giannis Antetokounmpo, for example, he
Mhm.
had to establish what he did, and the fact that he could move just bigger steps than anybody else on the court to get the foul called, and they've had to adjust and readjust how they call him from a technicality standpoint all the time every year. It's hilarious. And now it's going to be even more interesting with the likes of dudes that are bigger, lankier, take even wider steps than Giannis coming in the league. That's a little NBA rant, but it's a human psychology thing at the end of the day, and how the refs determine how they're going to call things, whether it's going to be more conservative, a little more forgiving with it. That it's a factor, and it contributes to fantasy football. Now I've been trying to figure out the best way to kind of figure out ref crews correlation with fantasy points allowed. That would be a
Yeah.
fun one to figure out someday. But I haven't got around to it. I was trying to figure out where to even start getting the officiating data, and there's databases out there, but I think you have to pay for them. So
Yeah.
it's not the easiest to acquire, but it would be interesting.
Yeah. You just need to basically know who the crews are per game and then have an idea of where to go. I mean, one other thing
Yeah.
that's related, I always wanted to be able to pull the stats on plays that were called back for penalties because not every play called back on a penalty is actually impacted by the penalty. So a lot of that is what would have been otherwise legitimate performance that just got negated because someone had a totally unnecessary like holding or defensive, or maybe there's like a roughing the passer, so a 5 yard run just gets ignored or something like that. I would be curious to see who has had the most, production removed for again because of penalties. That would be an interesting stat. If we had the same, probably different data source to get to that answer. There was actually a story I heard too of where at a fantasy football or a fantasy baseball conference, I think talking about daily fantasy, someone was a player who was able to like play daily fantasy sports professionally was asked about umpires in baseball and was actually nervous answering the question because that was such a secret for his success. Apparently, was
Wow.
the umpires were huge for what I don't know exactly how he took advantage of it, but that was the idea is that was his secret sauce.
Oh, man. StatMuse is trying to make you pay for everything now. I just wanted to see. So the Chicago Bears have definitely allowed the most fantasy points this year so far
Yeah.
out of all the teams. Just to clarify there. Tight end position. I have Travis Kelce, T.J. Hawkinson. I wouldn't be surprised though if Mark Andrews even like if this because Mark Andrews could have a better season than Travis Kelce, but because Travis Kelce has Patrick Mahomes, I don't think Mark Andrews will ever have enough opportunity to pass Travis Kelce from a production standpoint.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it would be very unlikely for something like that to.
But it's not out of the realm of possibilities. If
Yeah.
Travis Kelce sits, if Travis Kelce goes down or decides to follow Taylor Swift
Yeah.
on her international tour, like it's not out
Yeah.
of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah. Um, the Mark Andrews has also been very clear number two to Kelce. Like, and Hawkinson now with Cousins hurt, he's not going to step in. Andrews, I've been amazed too how much the last 3 years. Like it's been very consistently. You have Travis Kelce take a step down, Mark Andrews take a step down. Then you're looking at Hawkinson and Kittle and the other guys that are just popping up occasionally. Appropriate that Sam Laporta just scored a touchdown not too long ago as we're about to pull this off or about to talk about tight ends, but I think it's possible that Mark Andrews ends up passing Kelce. I think the right combination of matchups, maybe if Kelce gets banged up a little bit, maybe if he's actually not superhuman and does the injury, then that'll actually happen here. So I don't think it's a crazy claim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
after Q1, we had Hawkinson and Laporta as the top two guys.
Yeah. Now it's back to business as usual. Kelce and Andrews.
Yeah, it's until uh, until somebody's until somebody breaks something or retires. This is it. This is all
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews. This is what it's been since 2019, and that's it.
Yeah. Most predictable position at the top in fantasy, and then it's a disaster.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it is disaster. I had your guy Conklin in, and I should have played Kate Otten. I'm like, my gosh, that like
Yeah.
I did not, and how would I have even seen that coming? Like I thought your Jets were gonna do their thing against the Giants, but turns out the Giants were just like, no, we're just gonna dominate time of possession today and just
Yeah.
make it
Well,
an ugly game.
yeah, and uh, not that it was necessarily the turf's fault, but MetLife Stadium did its thing in that game too. There was a lot of injuries on
That
the
yeah,
Jets O
no,
line as well. Yeah.
MetLife is a yeah. We gotta get FIFA. We gotta get FIFA involved.
Yeah.
Get the grass. And then for the defenses, I have Cowboys and Ravens. Prior to that, it was the Bills, but the Bills have had a couple of they've had a couple of poor performances, but less poor performances than the 49ers and the Bengals. So that
Yeah.
I think is like obvious. The Bills have some defensive prowess there, whereas I Cincinnati has a couple of guys, and 49ers just laying eggs. I'm so confused by that team, and you would think they would be much more proficient, and it is just yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
what to think about them. They're going into a bye week, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of soul searching. Uh, you know, figure out like what are we, and yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see
Well,
what happens.
fun fact: defenses overall have been the best position this year compared to historical averages, at
Pretty
least recent
strong.
historical averages. Wide
Interesting.
receivers and kickers have been good. Defenses have been very good. Quarterbacks and running backs have not been good. They've been below expectations so far.
It
As
helps
far,
when you're not. It helps when PI calls are down.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's a huge factor to this, and it's okay. I don't mind it. It helps bring some equilibrium to the game, a little more balance. Defense can actually try to get into form. I mean, you want your fantasy players to produce, but I'm
yeah,
not. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna be like, oh no, like the defense is playing well today. What are we gonna do? Like it's gonna happen.
yeah.
So I
Just
guess
if I could comment on that real quick too, in case anyone's confused at the idea that it's possible that quarterbacks be poor, doing poorly, but wide receivers are doing well. It's really just wide receivers have been more predictable who's going to do well too.
yes,
And like it makes
yes.
sense when quarterbacks are doing poorly, defenses are doing well to balance that out. But running backs have been a little all over the place. Wide receivers, it's more been you can tell who it's going to be, so you're more likely to put the good players in your starting lineup, as opposed to quarterbacks. That's been less so the case.
So if you could go back to your draft boards, what would you have potentially done a little differently?
Well, I had a handful of snake drafts this year and actually stumbled into top three picks in a couple of them. I definitely, I definitely, what's funny is that as good as Justin Jefferson was when he was healthy, he looks like he wouldn't have been necessarily the best first pick. McCaffrey looks like he would have been up there. Obviously, Tyreek has been the best player so far. Like if you truly were taking it, say you're not afraid of reaching or anything like that, Tyreek was the first pick. What I wish I had done is trusted my instincts on a few of the guys that like ETN and Swift of they're talented enough and they're eventually going to break out. Swift has kind of cooled off a bit, obviously, but it as opposed to go with more of the unproven guys. Like I ended up with maybe more shares of Jameer Gibbs than I wanted to. We'll see if he's able to maintain a workload when Monty gets back, though. I think that I kind of wish I just assumed Travis Kelce was still just not going to get old again. Although again, I wasn't willing to spot to necessarily pick him. That's the challenge of snake drafts. Auction, I think the top players were, believe it or not, actually even if you were overpaying for the top players this year in auction drafts, you're probably underpaying for them because it's been very much a year to go super stars and scrubs. Because if you did stars and scrubs, you end up with someone like Mostert or HM, then you're probably in the top few spots in your league right now.
I wish I would have just taken AJ Brown.
Yeah,
That's about it for me. I mean, I remember kind of staring down the barrel of him, and I decided to go with. Where was I? I decided to go with Nick Chubb. And I don't know, like, when you're in that kind of weird turn position, like, I could
yeah,
have. I could have handled that a lot better. Maybe gotten a combination AJ Brown, Brees Hall, or something like that. Like I had enough. I had enough coverage to take him, and I don't. I hate picking guys like Blue. I wish I wouldn't have taken so many Drake London and Jameer Gibbs shares. Probably would have changed something there. I know Tyreek wouldn't have fallen to me, and that's okay. I could have figured something else out, but yeah, that's one that I'm just gonna be like, just because an offense was more run heavy and had a lot of success doing it. Sometimes if the drop off is there and the quarterback needs to actually be a passer, look for who that receiver might be, especially if they have a dude. I think that's something that I'm gonna factor in moving forward, especially if they don't really have a backfield, which the Eagles,
Yeah.
you can't really say DeAndre Swift is gonna get it done every week, even though
Yeah.
he's done actually very well for what they need him to be.
Yeah, he's been the best version of that Jalen Hurts buddy running back so far by easily. Yeah, it's and it's tough to tell too because receivers have been pretty dependable this year. We'll see if they are able to maintain that the rest of the year. If I were, it's a bit of a different question too. Like if you're drafting today versus if you're redrafting 8 weeks ago. If I were to draft today, maybe pick today, I think the top picks are probably something like Hill, McCaffrey, Chase. I think Jamar Chase is still up there, even though he's been, just a little bit. He's been one of the more overall disappointing first round picks, but maybe we had sign of things to come with this past week here. Not to mention he did have that huge week, one of the best actually weeks of the past 3 years. So yeah, it's definitely weird. I did not quite see this drop off that we had from the late, like from the running back position, especially like I know this. I can't make any sense of the Ramondre disappearance. I can't make much sense of how well like Damian Pierce is kind of gone. Najee Harris is still. It's not coming together. Aaron Jones, not much there. It's. Yeah, I would have gone if I could have gone back to 8 weeks. I would have gone 0 RB. I would have gone with the AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill. Like up and down, historically very up and down
Throwing
receiver.
a dart at Adam Thielen.
Yeah, right. Adam Thielen. Pay attention to that one random report that everyone knows that they heard, where they heard Puka Nacua might be a dude.
I did it.
Actually,
I did it in DraftKings with Puka Nacua week 1 at least.
oh well, hey,
Won
yeah,
$100. That was sweet.
that works.
But that's DraftKings. Can't really count that. Wasn't a good week for me DraftKings wise. And not that I got carried away, but I just should have built more lineups around AJ Brown like I did last week, and
Yeah,
that was I should have. I definitely I knew Washington has a good run stopping defense, and that AJ Brown would have had to be a factor. So that's something I'm just gonna probably build more AJ Brown lineups next week and watch AJ Brown it'll be a Devontae Smith week. Just watch
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
knowing
the
how
way it
that all
goes.
works.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what else do we have to look forward to you from this week outside of Fantasy Games 1 and anything else or just the usual?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch, but I'll say I have been at least signed to a practice squad, so you should be seeing my Fantasy Games 1 post with a slightly new, sponsor on the hood. But that's not till Wednesday, so I'll hold off on making that official announcement because you never know. You never know what might happen there. But
Want to jinx
outside of that,
yourself?
yeah, on track for a video. And if anybody who's familiar with my content wants to check that out or wants to leave a comment if there's anything you're hoping to see, happy to take some of that into account. So feel free to check out my YouTube or my blog. Post coming up on Reddit. Hopefully it gets a little more than 9 upvotes this time. Get some more viewers in there. But that's what we got to look forward to this week.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Exciting things to come. And we appreciate you doing this midway review.